And we're back with Davin Salvagno, Stories from the River, the podcast, the Elevate Your Purpose series. Davin, welcome back.
So good to be back.
So good to have you back. So good to have you back.
Welcome to Stories from the River, a show in which we go behind the scenes at Broad River Retail.
Davin, you become known as this phrase, so good. Where'd that phrase even come about?
So back when we just looking at different examples of purpose being lived out, let out by different companies, I would just to applaud them. I say, wow, that's so good. And I didn't even realize that I was saying that. And I was interviewed by Worth magazine with our friend Gary Ridge and Dr. Amber Salking, and the three of us were doing this interview, and I kept on saying so good, so good. And Gary actually started to mock me at some point during the interview and kept on saying, that's so good. It's so good, Davin. And I started to pick up on it, and I'm like, what are you doing? And like live on the interview.
That's funny.
And he says, well, that's your thing. That's what you say. And I said, it is? Like, you know how people have a thing and they're not aware that they do it? And sometimes it's, using the word like or or whatever, but you start like check marks of how often they say it. So I was doing that with so good, and then they made me aware of it. I said, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not going to say it anymore. Now they're aware. And they're like, no, now you need to double down on it. Yeah. Now you need to say it even more. And so now I actually say it intentionally, so much so that we named the next podcast that we did What Good Looks Like after the chapter, if you were listening to the last episode in the book, because I say so good, and then people are like, well, what does that mean? I'm like, well, this is what it means. And I point to examples of what good looks like.
That's a great story. I have been at events where people say the same word over and over. I remember one, we were at a session and the guy kept saying, okay. And then we were texting back and forth.
Joe Pesci.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the over under on it? It was like 147 on how many okays we're going to get in this
right.
presentation. And I think he went over it.
That's right.
All right. So Davin, we talked about in the your background, your history, how you got here, your first book that you wrote during the pandemic. Really now, and then we brought you in to Broad River during our United in Purpose series, which was a continuation of Purpose 828. And we did the Purpose 828 virtual session encore in 2020, which was such a restorative day. And then we were doing these different series, United in Purpose, during our United year, which was during the pandemic. And you spoke to our memory makers in November of 2020. It was virtual on a Zoom session. And then we talked about, I've been on your podcast, and you just came back to Broad River because you had a chance, you wanted to come to Charlotte, and we kind of worked out. You've got these double purposes for coming to cities, I guess, as we talked about in the last episode. But you were coming to Charlotte, or maybe you tagged that onto this trip, but you came and spoke to us for 2 days on this topic of the Thieves of Purpose, which we opened up the very first series, what happened, we'll talk about what happened with this first book, or the first manuscript of this book. But what is this concept for the Thieves of Purpose?
Yeah, so this second book, The Thieves of Purpose, I spend a lot of time talking about what purpose is and the power of purpose and how you find it and all those different things. And there's a lot of resources out there on how you find purpose and what the power of it is and to convince you of that. But there's not a lot on what gets in the way. And so what I recognized is that there's a lot of things holding people back from stepping into their purpose. There's a lot of things holding companies back from stepping into their purpose. And I wanted to start researching and identifying, well, what are those things? And I think very introspectively. So first I kind of had to look back at my life and say, okay, well, what are the things that I struggle with? Things like comparison, things like competition, things like envy, things like fear, excuses, unbelief, all of these different things. And I made a list of all these different pieces and started to look back and say, where did I struggle with that? And then started to research some different things like Psychology Today and different pieces to understand the psychology of what was going on behind each of these things. And so I thought, my next book, I want to write a book that is actually going to help people recognize what is robbing them from stepping into their purpose moment by moment, day by day, what's getting in the way. And that's what the second book has become, 12 different thieves that moment by moment, day by day, rob you of stepping into your purpose, either individually or organizationally.
I love it. Now, when you wrote your first book and you were in that process, were you thinking, I want to write a second book?
No.
So I remember when your first book came out and you called me, "Hey Charlie, do you think it's like large enough? It's a small book. It's not that many pages." And then you've got a Ken Blanchard story about that. So tell that story.
Yeah, and and I actually write about that in the first chapter of the second book, which the first chapter is comparison, because we tend to compare ourselves and everything that we do to everybody else. And I looked at the first book that came out, and it's a short book. It's Finding Purpose at Work is 91 pages. It's easy to read. You can read it in an afternoon. And I love big, thick, meaty books because I love to digest books. And so in many ways, I'm like, this isn't a book. It's a pamphlet. In fact, one person's made a joke and is like, you need to write a book with a spine, one that'll stand up on its own, right? You don't need to prop it up with something. And, I was struggling with that. I was having a lot of imposter syndrome and a lot of almost buyer's remorse, if you will, after writing that book, and thought, maybe I shouldn't have written it. I mean, all those thoughts, because I was comparing it to everyone else's work, all these people that I had admired as authors and thought leaders. And I had a conversation with Ken, and Ken's been a mentor of mine for years. He's written 62 books. He wrote the foreword to Finding Purpose at Work, which, again, I'm honored that he did that. And he said to me, Davin, what is my best-selling book of all time? And I said, The 1 Minute Manager. And he said, well, how many pages is The 1 Minute Manager? And I said, 76. And he just didn't respond. He just stared at me. And I said, okay, point taken. And so it made me realize that it wasn't about the size of the book. In fact, there's actually more word count in Finding Purpose at Work than there is in The 1 Minute Manager. And so I had to realize, well, why was I having all these thoughts? What was going on? And it became the motivation to write about comparison and to really study that. And then one of my favorite quotes of all time used to be, comparison is the thief of joy. I used to say it all the time, comparison is the thief of joy. And then I started to think about that, and I was teaching a high school class for a Christian school by our office in Michigan during this year that I was processing all this. Not this calendar year, but a couple of years ago when I was processing all this. And we had a debate. I said, today I want to debate comparison. Is it the thief of joy or is it not? And we started to debate that. And the reason I said that is because if you think about it, it all depends on what you're comparing yourself to. If you compare yourself to those who have more than you or who are doing things that you're not doing that you wish you were, then yes, it can rob you of your joy. But how often do we compare ourselves against those that have less, those that are struggling, those that are going through things that we're praying for them for, that we want to step in and help them with, that maybe we can do something about? Because once we start to compare ourselves to those who are struggling or have less or do those types of things, it doesn't rob us of our joy. What it does is it gives us perspective. It gives us gratitude. It actually might even nudge us to step into a moment of purpose to help them. So comparison can actually lead to purpose if we look at it through the lens of gratitude and how we can help others, right? And so that made me think, well, maybe comparison's not the thief of joy, because it can actually cause you to step into purpose, and then it can lead you to serving others, which then brings you joy. And so one of my students actually raised his hand in the back room. He says, comparison is not the thief of joy. Envy is. And I went, ooh, that's so good.
So good.
And so I wrote about that. That's in chapter 1. It's a taste of the 12 chapters. But we unpack, each thief in that book, and what it is. There's a story. There's some psychology to back it. And then here are some actual things that you can do to attack the thief when it comes so that you can step into those purpose moments.
Got it. That's great. You mentioned the imposter syndrome. Did you know that our mutual friend Gary Fry is writing a book called On the Imposter Syndrome?
I do. I actually had dinner at his house on Saturday while I was here in Charlotte. He made me a fantastic burger and met his bride, Jennifer, and they were very gracious hosts. And I can't wait. His book's coming out in just a few weeks, I think.
Wow.
And I can't wait to read it. It's going to be a great book.
I've got to get Gary on the podcast. I've been on his podcast, Anything But Typical, as well. So, okay. So when did you decide to write The Thieves of Purpose?
So once I compiled all of this and recognized that there was something here, I said, it was the same exact feeling as the very first book. Like, there's a message here. There's 85% of people out there, according to Gallup, that are unfulfilled at work and at home and in different things of their lives. And I realized, well, what's plaguing that? And we could talk about bad leadership, company culture, all those different things. But realistically, we're all battling with different variations of these thieves that are robbing us of being who we need to be at work and who we need to be at home. And there's a message here. And so about 2 years ago, I want to say it was about 2021, we had finished the Purpose Summit, and I was in the Smokies. I was down in Tennessee.
I remember that when you did that vacation.
Remember that trip?
Yeah.
And at my friend Brad's house, who I shared about from Northwestern Mutual, and he's got a great property called the Watauga Highlands that has one of the best views of the Smoky Mountains you've ever seen in your life. And I'm sitting on the front porch, and I was doing some writing, and it kind of came to me in that moment that that's when this book was going to be birthed. And so I started writing.
Okay, so that's about 2 years ago. And then when did you finish it?
Well, it's not done yet, but it was almost done, as we alluded to, I think, in the very first episode of this series that we did. And, I had it almost finished. And at that point, there were 15 Thieves. I've since condensed it to 12 because there's some overlap and connectivity between them. And so I'd written 15 chapters. And that was done in early of 2022. I want to say it was January, February of 2022.
But something happened. You had it done, but then technology happened.
That's right. So it was finished, and I had carved off Sunday afternoons post football season because I love watching my Eagles on Sunday. But go to church, and then there's football, and so I kind of had this thing. If I could sit and watch football for 3 hours, I can sit and write for 3 hours, right? So let's replace football with writing. And so it was a mid to late February afternoon, and I went to go put some finishing touches on the book, and I go to open up the file, and the icon is there. I actually had the cover of the book as the icon on my desktop, and I go to click on it, and it won't open. And I keep trying to click on it, and it keeps saying file not found. I'm like, something's not right. So then I go back into where it's housed on the computer and in the cloud, and it just says 0 bytes. Like there's no data in there. It's just a picture of the cover. And I start panicking, and I call some people on our team who are better at technology than I am, and have them take a look at it. They can't find it anywhere on my computer on the cloud. I contact the Genius Bar. Like, this thing is nowhere to be found. And it was kind of one of those moments where it's just so ironic considering the title of the book, because it was one of those moments where, like, if you remember being a kid and you ever built a house of cards out of cards or out of dominoes, like maybe you create like an incredible domino set, and then like you're almost done, but then you actually hit one and the whole thing goes down. You're like, I don't want to do it again. That was just way too much work. That was that moment, and I almost gave up on it. And again, I can know what my purpose is, but lose my why if you listen to the last episode. And this was one of those moments. I didn't want to rewrite it.
So and by the way, and so something convicted you to, like, okay, I'm going to pick this back up. So you had this book, you would go to the Genius Bar, the Apple Store, you have your IT team look at it. No one can recover the file, which is crazy to me. So the gremlins got it, they ate it. Your book, your manuscript, hundreds of hours, I'm sure, were gone. And you had this pit of the stomach, like, I'm done. Maybe this book wasn't meant to be. I don't want. It's been stolen. The Thieves of Purpose stole my book. So when did you decide I'm going to kind of pick myself up by my bootstraps and just go at it again?
Yeah, so I have to give credit to my literary agent, Scott Jeffrey Miller. He's a phenomenal friend, and he's been down this path. I'm not sure if he's ever lost a book. But I created a post, and he had texted me. He goes, "Really?" Like, he saw the LinkedIn post, and he texted me and he said, "It's gone." And at the time, he wasn't my literary agent. He was just kind of a great friend, someone who I admired greatly, who's written 7 books, 5 of them best-selling books.
He writes Master Mentors.
He's the Master Mentors author, 10 different books.
And does the On Leadership
podcast.
Yeah.
Franklin Covey's On Leadership podcast with Scott Jeffrey Miller. And it's the largest listened to leadership podcast in the world. They've done 300 some episodes. And we have not yet to do an episode with me. So, Scott, if you're listening to this, I'm still waiting for my invitation.
I'll listen to his episode.
I know, they're fantastic. They're so good. He would appreciate that I said that, because he loves calling me out. But he had texted me and he said, "Really? You lost the whole thing?" And I said, yes. And then he actually encouraged me to rewrite it, because, and he doesn't mind me sharing this, I actually wrote about this in the introduction of the book. I said, Scott, I'm not sure I have the motivation to write it. And we were on a Zoom call, and he's got these, iconic glasses. And he said, "Davin," he said, "listen," he said, I struggle with my purpose as a father. I never thought I'd be a father. I never wanted to really be a father. And now if you watch his posts, all of his posts are about his 3 boys. Almost every post is about his 3 boys, and I love them. But, prior to this conversation, and I'm not giving credit to the conversation, but he very rarely posted about his family. It was really just all about his work. And he had lost his father and some things were going on. I think he was going, through halftime, if you will. He had achieved great success, and now he was looking at significance. And he pulled his glasses down and he said, I need you to write that book because I need to understand what's robbing me of stepping into my purpose as a father. And so my who behind writing the book became Scott.
Wow.
And then Scott said, and I'd like to be your literary agent, and we're going to get this book published. Wow. And so he's been a great friend, dear friend. And we just finished the proposal and did some editing to some of the chapters, and he's courting with some publishers right now. So stay tuned.
And did I hear you say you wrote it not twice, but 3 times?
You did, not on this episode. You heard me say that the other time. And listen, for those of you who remember pictures of like someone with a typewriter and they're like typing and then they write, right? And then they read it and then they hate what they write, so they crumble it up and there's just a waste basket filled with paper around it. This book has been that for me. And the reason why is because I continue to struggle with all of these thieves. You hear someone say, I wrote the book on that, right? And that means that they're a subject matter expert or they've conquered, all of these things on this. And the reality is I might be a subject matter expert on this, but I haven't conquered them. Mm-hmm. And so there's a little bit of that imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. There's a little hypocrisy there that I struggle and say, I'm sitting here telling you, the reader, these are the 12 things that are getting in your way. How to identify them, what to do to overcome them, and find myself still struggling with them. And so then I, delete. And there was one point where I was like, this is just rubbish. And I just scrapped the whole thing and started all over again.
So you were the gremlin the second time.
I was. That's exactly right.
Maybe you did that in your sleep the first time.
Well, and actually I'm going to tip the hat here. The reason it's called the Thief of Purpose and not the Thieves of Purpose is because the very last chapter I reveal the thief is actually you. There's a battlefield in your mind.
Okay.
All these are just thoughts in your head. And you get to choose which one you listen to.
I got you. It's the one you feed. Which of the 2 wolves?
Which of the 2 wolves?
Yeah. The comparison, you talked about, other people who have more, other people have less, gaining perspective. I also like the idea of comparing yourself to maybe who you were yesterday or who you can become.
That's right.
And looking for those incremental gains, and finding joy in that. So, but I've heard you give us talk on 6 of the 12 thieves, and it was two talks back to back, telling stories, weaving family stories, personal stories, business stories, and it was phenomenal. So can you just hit on the 12 thieves or at least the 6 that you talked about, if you don't want to give away all the book, and then we'll give the plug for the book. But what can you share about the Thieves of Purpose other than the last one you gave away, which is you?
Very good. I'll briefly touch on 6 of the 12, just like I did for your talk.
Fair enough. Don't give away all 12.
You'll have to get the book to get the other 12. How's that?
Or the audiobook.
Or the audiobook. There it is, the plug again. Oh, man. For those of you who weren't listening earlier, I struggle with audiobooks, but I've been convicted to record an audiobook. So we're
in the studio.
In this studio.
All right, Davin.
All right.
6 of the 12.
6 of the 12. And these are not in order. So if you read the book, the first 6 chapters are not these 6. I just picked on 6 that I feel are more prevalent, and maybe not more important than the other 6, but more prevalent. So thief number 1, comparison. We talked a little bit about that. So I'm not going to elaborate on that because I think we did that. Thief number 2 that I talked about with you in the Memory Makers was competition. So competition can be healthy. All of human capitalism and all that is built on competition. There's a healthy sense. I love sports. We love watching football. We talked about it. Competition can be healthy, but competition can also get in the way where collaboration should step in. There's so many people that are focused on getting their fair share of the pie rather than working together just to create more pie.
Right.
And so in areas where we can collaborate to make a greater difference together and step into purpose, competition can rob us of collaboration because we've got a scarcity mindset rather than an abundance mindset.
And that's so key, that mindset of scarcity versus abundance. And I think I like to say competition gets a bad rap. I mean, when you look at the etymology of the word competition, it comes from the Latin word competare, which means to strive together.
Right.
It was never about one versus the others. We're lifting each other up through
That's right.
competition. You know,
That's right.
You might do your best because you got someone there with you, but I love collaboration. That's one of our 5 core values at the River. So
it is, and it's one of ours too. Collaboration over competition, not collaboration, not competition. Because a lot of people think that when you put a greater than sign or over, it demonizes the other side of it, and it doesn't. Because competition, to your point, does get a bad rap.
Yeah.
But we should always choose to collaborate wherever possible versus compete.
We unpack it by saying, with humility, we make better decisions when we make them together.
Yes.
Is how we
so good. Say it again. Say it again.
With humility, and I hope I'm saying this correctly, with humility, we make better decisions when we make them together. And do you know that our original core value is teamwork?
Oh, wow.
And we struggled as a leadership team several years ago with silos. Don't talk to them. They're on my team. That's my team. I'll talk to my team. Well, wait a second. This isn't a siloed organization. We had to tear down those silos. And so we changed. Language is cultural. Language is important. Word choice is important. So we tore that word teamwork down and replaced it with collaboration. So we're all on the same team. Okay. So that's competition.
So we went collaboration, competition, and then the next one that I shared with you guys was distraction. So we can get distracted very easily. We could be very focused on purpose, but we live in just a very distracting world with technology, with social media. We have a bunch of different things competing for our attention. And so I feel like we've become human doings rather than human beings. And so the challenge in that chapter is for you to focus on being present. How do you focus on being where your feet are, being present in the moment so that you don't miss the purpose that is right in front of you because you're so focused on what you need to do versus who you need to be.
And that can really create regret over time if you keep doing that. So being focused on those purpose moments can really eliminate regret because you're focused on the who you're supposed to be with at that time and then giving them your presence. Okay, that's 3.
That's 3. And then we'll get into one of my favorites is excuses. So an excuse is a reason stuffed with a lie. That's what it is. It's the things that we tell ourselves to make ourselves feel better about not doing what we know that we should do. And so we make an excuse and and often the story that we tell ourselves is a lie. And so we have to combat that. And I know you're dying just for me to tell this. So I shared this with the memory makers, obviously last week. And then we just talked about Gary Fry, our friend Gary Fry. And so he invited me to an F3 workout this past Sunday here in Charlotte. And I went to church with a friend. And then afterwards, we had gotten some really great barbecue. And I ate way too much barbecue. And it was like 3 o'clock. We had finished lunch. And the F3 was at 4:30. And there's no way I was going to. I'm just sitting here saying, I am hurting. And so I sent a text message to you and to Gary and said, hey, I don't think I'll make the workout. And you were doing a 36-mile bike ride and sent me a video message and said, from the bike while riding, and said, hey, no excuses. Remember, no excuses. And so, again, that kind of gave me conviction and said, wait, what lie are you telling yourself? And so I went, did the F3 workout. It was awesome. I felt great when I was done. And I met some amazing people that led to some great conversations that had I not done that, I wouldn't have felt better that day. I would not have met the people I was supposed to meet. I'm sure there's some very purposeful things that are going to happen out of those conversations that would not have happened if I would have listened to that excuse.
Yeah, well, good thing. And probably next time if you do an F3 workout, you're not going to do a pregame workout with some heavy Carolina barbecue.
That's right. That's right. I'll be much more intentional about that. That's right.
Okay, so after excuses?
It's excuses. And so then there's unbelief. And unbelief is, we tell ourselves that we can't achieve. We've been told no. I think the average person hears no 50,000 times before they're 12. And they hear yes maybe 10,000 times. So we've been told no 5 times as many times as we've been told yes. And so it's natural for us to not believe that we can do something or that we're capable of something. But the reality is that everything that exists, everything that we use, every technology that we have, everything once did not exist, but someone believed it was possible. And we talked a lot about Roger Bannister and, running the 4-minute mile. And it was thought that you can't run a 4-minute mile. Your heart would explode. And it was scientifically impossible. And so we don't believe that can happen. And then someone challenges that. And then hundreds of people have then, ran a 4-minute mile since. or that we couldn't go to space, or that, there's just a lot of things that, our self-limiting beliefs rob us of our purpose just because it's never been done doesn't mean it can't be done, or just because someone told you that you're not capable, that's a lie. You are capable. One of my favorite stories is Nick Vujicic. I should have shared this with your memory makers, but one of my favorite speakers and now friends and colleagues of all time was born with no arms and legs, born without them. And he doesn't allow that to stop him. He doesn't make an excuse, one of the previous thieves, but he also doesn't stop them from believing that he can do things. I've watched him play soccer. I've watched him golf. I've watched him swim without arms and legs because he believed.
Yeah.
And right. So unbelief can stop you and rob you of your purpose if you listen to that voice.
And he's also not comparing himself to others who do have arms.
That's exactly right. And these things work interchangeably, right? So when you think about that, they work interchangeably with each other.
Belief is so powerful, though.
So powerful.
You got to start with belief. Okay, the sixth one that you're going to give us today.
All right, so I'm going to give you one that I did not give your memory makers because I think that this one ties them all together, and it's lies. There are lies that we tell ourselves, right? There's these things that we say in our head, and we believe them. And I could walk through all of the thieves, right? I could walk through comparison, and I can start comparing myself. And the reality is that what I might be telling myself is a complete lie. Excuses, complete lie. Telling myself that I can't believe, that unbelief, right? Saying that I don't believe that I can do it. Complete lie. So one of the biggest thieves of purpose are the lies that we are constantly telling ourselves, the self-talk in our head. Mm-hmm. Do we weigh those thoughts and say, wait, is that really true? Right? Is that excuse I'm telling myself really true? That story of comparison, is it really true?
Yeah.
The fact that I can't do that, is that really true? And so I think we need to challenge the lies that are in our head and question their validity, because those are the biggest thing that are often holding us back from the purpose that we're called to.
It sounds like, what genre of book would you put this under? Is it self-improvement? Is it purpose? Is it leadership development? Is it self-accountability, personal growth and development?
Yeah, I think it fits into a multitude. It's obviously definitely a self-help book, but it's also written from multiple perspectives, both personally and professionally. So it could be a business book, it could be a self-help book, it could be a professional development book. I think it fits into any of those three categories.
Okay. And it's The Thief of Purpose.
The Thief of Purpose.
The Thief of Purpose, and it's coming out when?
Hopefully late 2024. So my friend Scott will determine that, who I shared about earlier.
We have to wait a whole other year to
That's
get
right.
Okay,
that's exactly right.
That's the way the traditional publishing
That's how the traditional publishing works. Yeah, it's on their timeline, not mine.
All right, Davin. Well, thank you so much for giving us the plug on The Thief of Purpose, for coming and speaking to our memory makers and sharing 2 keynotes with us. I mean, everyone who attended, just the survey scores, the anecdotal and subjective feedback, objective feedback has been remarkable and amazing and really powerful. It really, there's a lot of who's that connected with what you shared and the stories that you shared with us last week, and a little bit here with this audience. So get The Thief of Purpose, late 2024. We'll keep you plugged in. We'll share it with our team. I'm sure we'll buy several copies for ourselves. Davin, this has been a great episode in the Davin Salvagno Elevate Your Purpose series. I'd like to bring you back for one more episode to talk about maybe the main reason that you came to Charlotte, which is the Purpose Summit 2024. Can I bring you back for one more episode?
Absolutely. Would love to be back.
All right, guys, go make an awesome memory today. Go make today one of your life's best. Thank you so much for joining us from Stories from the River.
Thanks for listening to Stories from the River. To check out more episodes, visit storiesfromtheriver.com. Join us again next week, and remember to like, rate, and subscribe to the podcast.